For recruits thought they had her cornered in the mess hall, a confident, new girl they assumed would be an easy target. 45 seconds later, every one of them learned a brutal truth. She wasn't just trained, she was a Navy SEAL. Calm, precise, and unstoppable, she turned intimidation into humiliation, chaos into control. With every move, she demonstrated skills that went far beyond physical strength, awareness, tactical thinking, and psychological mastery that left her challengers stunned and the entire unit in awe. From maneuvering through obstacles with unmatched efficiency to predicting every action in high-pressure drills, she dominated both body and mind. No one dared challenge her, yet her presence commanded respect naturally. This is the story of one woman, underestimated by numbers and arrogance, who turned every confrontation into a lesson in discipline, precision, and raw skill. Watch as the mess hall encounter escalates into a series of mind-bending drills, psychological games, and high-stakes challenges that prove she is not just any recruit, she is a force of nature. The mess hall was buzzing with the usual midday chaos. The smell of grilled chicken and burnt toast hung heavy in the air, mingling with the sharp tang of disinfectant that no one seemed to notice anymore. Sunlight slanted through the high windows, catching on the edges of trays and stainless steel utensils. Laughter, chatter, and the occasional clatter of metal on concrete created a backdrop of organized chaos that the recruits had grown accustomed to, but today would be different. At the center of the room, four of the newest recruits huddled together, whispering and casting quick glances toward her. She was sitting alone at the far end of the hall, tray neatly in front of her, posture impeccable, eyes scanning the room with quiet confidence. Something about her made them uneasy. She wasn't the type to fumble with her food, knock over her drink, or stammer when someone spoke. She carried herself with a calm intensity that set her apart from the rest. "Hey," one of the recruits muttered, elbowing the guy next to him. "She's new too, right? Looks different." "Different how?" the other replied, trying to sound casual. "I mean, she's a girl. That's all. We shouldn't." "Sure," the first interrupted. "Watch this." They slid out from their table, moving like predators closing in on prey. The four of them formed a semicircle around her, cutting off any escape routes. She noticed immediately. Her eyes narrowed slightly, just enough to make them notice they had been seen. "Hey, new girl," one said, trying for a confident smirk. "You lost or something. This is our spot." She looked up slowly, her calm demeanor unshaken. "I'm fine where I am," she said simply, voice steady, controlled. There was no fear in her tone, only a quiet assurance that made the four of them hesitate. "Oh, come on," another chimed in, a sneer forming on his face. "Don't be shy. Join the rest of us." That's when the subtle shift happened. She straightened in her seat, hands resting lightly on her tray, but her body coiled like a spring. Her eyes flicked to each of the four recruits, calculating, precise, unflinching. The mess hall noise seemed to fade into a dull hum as the tension thickened. "Listen," she said, voice still calm. "I don't want trouble. You want to talk, fine. But don't mistake my courtesy for weakness." The recruits exchanged uneasy glances. A girl who could talk like that, in front of the whole hall, and remain unshaken? One of them decided to push further. "You think you're some kind of tough girl?" he asked, stepping closer. His chest puffed, trying to appear larger than he actually was. She didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, just enough for her gaze to lock on his eyes. "I think I'm exactly what I need to be," she said. And then it happened. The first recruit lunged forward, trying to grab her tray or push her out of the seat. What happened next was instantaneous. In less than half a second, she twisted, slipping free like water, and used the momentum to pivot the first recruit into the second. The second tripped over the third, and by the time the fourth tried to intervene, she had already planted her feet firmly, eyes scanning for the next move. The mess hall erupted into shocked murmurs and gasps. Forks dropped. Trays clattered. But she didn't move aggressively. Every motion was measured, precise, efficient. Her body moved with the kind of lethal grace that only comes from years of specialized training. Whoa, what the? One recruit stammered, still scrambling to get up from the floor. Who even taught you that? Another whispered, eyes wide. She smiled faintly, but it wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile that acknowledged they had underestimated her, and that it had been a very bad idea. The captain overseeing the mess hall from the corner noticed the commotion and strode over, authority radiating with each step. "Everything okay here?" he asked, scanning the scene quickly. The recruits could barely speak, still recovering from their own chaos. She simply nodded politely, picking up her tray again, and took a bite of her food as if nothing had happened. The captain's gaze lingered on her. "Not bad," he muttered under his breath, then turned back to the recruits, who were now sheepishly retreating to their table, bruised egos and all. It took exactly 45 seconds for the entire mess hall to realize who they had been dealing with. Whispers began to ripple through the tables. She's Navy SEAL," someone murmured. "Yeah, that's why no one messes with her." The 4 recruits were left stunned, their bravado completely shattered. The lesson had been delivered in less than a minute. Strength wasn't just about size or numbers, and appearances could be dangerously misleading. As she finished her lunch, the quiet intensity remained. Around her, the hall slowly returned to its usual hum, but everyone knew the rules had subtly changed. Messing with her wasn't an option. Not today. Not ever. And for the 4 recruits, that day would be etched into their memories forever. They had boxed her in, yes, but only she had controlled the fight. Only she had dictated the outcome. And in that mess hall, a simple lunch had turned into a lesson in humility, respect, and the quiet power of a Navy SEAL. The mess hall had barely settled after the chaos of the previous incident when whispers still echoed across the tables. Every recruit, even the ones who had nothing to do with the confrontation, seemed to instinctively give her space. She ate with the same calm precision, picking up her fork, cutting her chicken, and bringing it to her lips with deliberate rhythm. It was almost hypnotic, so precise that it drew eyes even from those trying not to watch. The 4 recruits who had tried to corner her sat at the far end of the hall, nursing their bruised egos. They exchanged uneasy glances, muttering under their breaths, unable to ignore the reality that they had just been humiliated in front of the entire mess hall. "Do you think, is she really a SEAL?" one whispered, voice trembling slightly. "She has to be," said another, his jaw tight. "No one moves like that without serious training. Did you see how she calculated each move? She wasn't just defending herself. She controlled everything around her. She predicted us before we even acted. Meanwhile, she didn't ignore them. Her eyes subtly scanned the room, noting reactions, observing behavior patterns. Each recruit had a tell, a small subconscious movement that revealed their next step before they even made it. This was not just self-defense. It was situational awareness honed to perfection. The captain approached her table again, clipboard in hand, his expression unreadable. "Impressive," he said, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Most people wouldn't have lasted half that long without losing control." She nodded politely. "Thank you, sir." It's all about maintaining composure, no matter the numbers or size. The captain's eyes twitched slightly, a rare sign of amusement. Composure and precision. Good. But remember, being noticed like that, it invites challenges. She allowed a brief smirk. "I can handle challenges." By now, the recruits had begun whispering among themselves, clearly strategizing. They weren't planning another physical confrontation. They had learned that lesson, but they did want to undermine her somehow. Subtle, psychological tactics, rumors, exclusion, tests to see if her confidence wavered. But what they didn't understand was that her mental training was as sharp as her physical skills. She could anticipate their schemes before they even fully formed. As she gathered her tray to leave, one of the recruits tried a subtle move, bumping her shoulder with his own while pretending to walk past. The instant physical contact was deliberate yet minimal, enough to startle or provoke if she wasn't paying attention. But she was paying attention. Her body reacted instinctively, leaning just enough to shift the force, maintaining balance. Her hand flicked toward the edge of the table, not in aggression, but in readiness. The recruit froze, realizing too late that he had underestimated her reflexes. "Careful," she murmured, voice calm yet laced with warning. "You might hurt yourself trying to get a reaction." The subtle threat was enough. The recruit stumbled slightly backward, glancing at his friends, who now seemed to fully understand the kind of person they were dealing with. Their whispers stopped. By the time she exited the mess hall, the 4 recruits were left in stunned silence. They had tried intimidation, physical force, and subtle psychological cues, and every attempt had been countered without a single overt act of aggression from her. Outside the hall, she walked with purpose, each step measured, precise. Her mind ran through a silent checklist: situational awareness, exit routes, potential threats, observation of body language. Even though this was only a mess hall, every environment was a potential training ground, every interaction a chance to test control. Meanwhile, the 4 recruits regrouped. Their bravado had been shattered, but their curiosity was now tinged with respect and fear. "We need to learn from her," one muttered. "Not just fighting. Everything, her composure, her observation skills, were amateurs compared to her." They didn't know it yet, but she had already predicted this exact conversation. That, in itself, was a lesson in tactical superiority. Awareness wasn't just physical, it was psychological, strategic, and emotional. And she excelled in all. Back in the dormitory later that evening, the hallways quiet after training drills, she reflected on the day. Each interaction, each challenge, was a data point. She processed it all swiftly, calculating probabilities and outcomes, mentally cataloging who posed potential issues and who was simply naive. For a Navy SEAL, even a mess hall skirmish was a mission. Gather intel, control variables, and execute actions with precision. Meanwhile, in the barracks, the whispers spread. "Did you see how fast she reacted? She predicted every move before we even made it. I think she's testing us." The 4 recruits, once so confident, were now nervous, anxious, unsure of their place in this environment. For the first time, the hierarchy in the unit felt real, and it was not in their favor. By the end of the day, the lesson had permeated through the entire mess hall. Everyone knew the new girl wasn't just another recruit. She was disciplined, lethal, and mentally untouchable. Even the instructors had begun to notice subtle things: the way she observed, how she anticipated situations, how every action seemed intentional and controlled. For the recruits, there was an unspoken acknowledgement: respect had to be earned. And some individuals didn't just earn it, they commanded it by default. And for her, Part 2 of the day's mission had concluded. Observation, control, and psychological dominance had been maintained. She had turned a simple lunch encounter into a training ground for situational mastery. The Navy SEAL mindset wasn't just about combat, it was about dominance, awareness, and precision, and she had demonstrated it flawlessly. By tomorrow, everyone in the unit would be thinking twice before trying anything. And she would continue to move through her day, calm, focused, unstoppable, always observing, always calculating, always in control. The sun had barely risen over the training grounds the next morning, casting long shadows across the neatly lined obstacles, climbing walls, and obstacle courses. The recruits shuffled into formation, still buzzing from the previous day's mess hall incident. The 4 recruits who had tried to intimidate her yesterday were particularly tense, shooting nervous glances toward her. She simply stood, calm and composed, as if the previous day had been nothing more than a warm-up. Today, the drill instructor's voice boomed, echoing across the grounds: "We push limits. Physical endurance, mental focus, teamwork. No excuses. No shortcuts. Move out." The recruits broke into motion, sprinting toward the first obstacle, a towering wall that had claimed many egos before. She moved with fluid efficiency, her every stride calculated, her balance perfect. The other recruits struggled, slipping, fumbling, and occasionally colliding with each other. By the time they reached the wall, she had already sized it up, mapped out handholds and footholds with precision, and executed a flawless climb without even breaking a sweat. The 4 recruits who had boxed her in the mess hall exchanged panicked looks. How does she do that?" one whispered. "She makes it look easy." It wasn't easy. Not for anyone. But for her, this was the baseline training that the Navy SEALs had drilled into her mind and body. Every move was second nature, every decision immediate, every response premeditated in the moment it was executed. As the unit moved to the next station, a series of balance beams over water, the real challenge began. The instructor added an unexpected twist, a weighted vest, simulating combat conditions, making the slightest misstep potentially disastrous. Most recruits faltered immediately. Legs shook, balance wavered, panic flared. But she adjusted instinctively, her center of gravity shifting imperceptibly to counter every movement. Each step was controlled, precise, calculated. The water below was not a threat. It was just another variable to master. Halfway through, the instructor called out, "Surprise drill. You will now carry a 50-pound sandbag across the beams while maintaining balance." Failure is not an option. A collective groan echoed. This was designed to break recruits mentally and physically, to push their limits and expose weaknesses. Most looked at her, expecting hesitation. Instead, she nodded once, acknowledging the challenge as an opportunity, not a threat. She picked up the sandbag with perfect form, the weight controlled, arms steady. The 4 recruits who had previously tried to box her in now froze, their panic evident. They stumbled, nearly falling multiple times. She moved with the grace of a predator. Every motion deliberate, no wasted energy, no hesitation. Step by step, she crossed the beams flawlessly, the water beneath calm as she completed the challenge. By the time she reached the end, a hush had fallen over the unit. Even the instructors nodded subtly, impressed by her composure and skill. The 4 recruits were shaken, not just by her physical ability, but by her mental dominance. They had realized that raw strength and numbers meant little against precision, awareness, and calm under pressure. Later, during a break, one of them finally muttered, we can't touch her. She's in a completely different league." And she didn't need to respond. Her calm presence, her quiet confidence, her unmatched skill spoke louder than words ever could. She had already mentally cataloged their weaknesses, their reactions, and their potential. The training ground was more than just an obstacle course, it was a battlefield, and she was always 3 steps ahead. The rest of the day continued in a blur of drills, endurance tests, and unexpected twists. Yet, she moved through each challenge effortlessly, maintaining the SEAL mindset, focus, adaptability, precision. She wasn't just completing the drills, she was teaching a silent lesson to everyone around her. By the evening, when the recruits were collapsed in exhaustion, she remained composed, stretching with calm efficiency. Her presence radiated confidence and control. The 4 recruits had been humbled, their arrogance replaced with respect tinged with fear. In the quiet of the training grounds as the sun dipped below the horizon, she reflected on the day. Each obstacle, each unexpected challenge, had been a test, but for her, it was simply another chance to refine skills that had been hard-earned. She didn't seek attention, but she didn't shy away from demonstrating capability. And for the unit, the lesson was clear. She wasn't just another recruit. She was a Navy SEAL, a force of nature, someone whose presence alone demanded respect, who turned challenges into opportunities, and who could dominate any environment, mess hall, obstacle course, or battlefield, with unmatched precision and calm. The following morning, the training grounds were shrouded in a thin mist. The recruits assembled in silence, each aware that the events of the previous days had shifted the dynamics of the unit. Whispers of the new recruit, the Navy SEAL, were on everyone's lips. No one dared challenge her, but tension hung heavy in the air. Today, the instructors had planned something unprecedented, a simulated capture scenario. Recruits would be ambushed in teams, forced to think, react, and escape under pressure. It was designed to push the most capable recruits to their limits and to expose weaknesses in those who relied on brute force or panic rather than strategy. She stepped into the field, scanning her surroundings. Mist curled around the trees and obstacles, visibility limited. She mapped escape routes, potential ambush points, and vantage positions almost instinctively. The 4 recruits who had boxed her in the mess hall yesterday were assigned to the same team. Their nervous glances betrayed uncertainty. They were counting on numbers, hoping intimidation would somehow work. Again. The whistle blew, and chaos erupted. Recruits sprinted toward their objectives. The 4 tried to corner her early, aiming to catch her off guard. But she anticipated their movement, subtly shifting her position to draw them into a trap of her own design. Within moments, they found themselves navigating a maze of obstacles she had already calculated mentally, sliding under bars, pivoting around corners, forced to overexert themselves to keep up. One of the 4 lunged suddenly, attempting a tackle. She reacted instantly, redirecting his momentum so that he crashed into a padded wall. Another tried a flanking maneuver, but she pivoted, using the environment to her advantage. Her body moved with fluid precision. Every step, every twist, every motion calculated to maintain control without breaking rhythm. The instructor blew the whistle halfway through the drill, observing intently. Even he could see that she wasn't just participating, she was orchestrating the scenario, using her training to dominate both mentally and physically. By the time the drill ended, the 4 recruits were exhausted, bruised, and utterly humbled. They realized something crucial. She didn't just fight. She dictated the battle. Her awareness, adaptability, and precision made her untouchable in a field designed to challenge even seasoned recruits. Later, as the recruits regrouped, whispers filled the air. Did you see how she predicted every move? She didn't just defend herself. She controlled the situation from start to finish. We can't even imagine trying that against her. She didn't need to respond. Her calm presence, the subtle intensity in her eyes, and her unshakable composure spoke volumes. She had turned a high-stakes drill into a lesson in situational mastery, leaving everyone, friends and rivals alike, aware that underestimating her was impossible. By the end of Part 4, the message was clear. In any environment, under any pressure, she was prepared, unstoppable, and always 3 steps ahead. For the recruits, especially the 4 who had challenged her first, the respect and wariness was permanent. And for her, it was simply another day demonstrating the Navy SEAL mindset, dominance through precision, awareness, and calm control.